Hey, all you cats and kittens. Anyone else here watching Tiger King? No? Maybe? Okay, cool. So, chapter 17 is reproductive systems. We're going to go through a little bit on just general male-female reproductive roles, the gonads, and then we'll look at male reproductive structures, semen production. Then we'll look at female reproductive structures, uterine cycle, ovarian cycle, disorders, sexual response, lots on birth control, and then I threw in some on development and aging as well. Okay. Gonads are they're the primary sex organ. So in males, it's the testes, and in females, it's the ovaries. And these are in two systems because they have two functions. So first, they produce gametes, or your sex cells. Sex cells, sex cells. So in the testes, sperm. Right? So the testes have two types of tissue in there. They'll have these tubules where they make sperm, and in between those, they'll have spots where they produce sex hormones. So they're testosterone, right? And that is hormonal, right? So what system would that be in? Ooh, that is bad. I'm just going to erase that. And write endocrine. Okay. And the ovaries, theirs is the egg or ovum. Right? Okay. So here's the testes. We've got these tubes where we're making sperm, right? And then in the female, this shows the different stages of making eggs. So two different strategies, males versus females. Let me put myself up here again. Males produce lots of sperm, can have the ability to father lots of children at the same time. Females, much less ability to do so. They ovulate generally once every 28 days, producing a full-fledged egg that they release during ovulation to possibly be fertilized. Right? So in general, females should be the pickier of the species because they invest far more, especially with carrying the offspring and then lactation after. So you would think that, I'm not going to go into polygynous versus polyandrous, but it's fun. In general, let's look at asexual versus sexual reproduction. So asexual, making identical copies, usually in less complex organisms. Whereas sexual, you take two different parents, you divide their chromosomes in half, and then you have these gametes. And then you put them together to have a full cell, a zygote, that develops into the organism, the offspring. So here, much more complicated, a lot more places where things could go wrong, but the whole point is that you have variable offspring. Whenever you have a changing environment, having variability in offspring is good because then hopefully you'll have some individuals more likely to succeed in a changing environment. You might have heard this story before, but there are snails that are hermaphroditic. They have both parts. And they can reproduce sexually or asexually. Some will actually penis fight to see who has to carry the offspring, but that's worms more. Anyways, in a very stable environment, those snails will do asexual reproduction and make identical copies. Because if they're doing well, their offspring will most likely do well. But if they're not doing great, if there's a high parasite load in the lake, they'll do sexual reproduction where hopefully some of their offspring will be more tolerant of the parasites or more able to fight them off. Okay. So each gamete or sex cell, the egg or sperm, where can I go? We'll just leave it as sexual reproduction. So each gamete contains one set of our chromosomes. Whereas once you put them together, like our regular body cells, they have two copies. So gametes, 23 chromosomes, that's haploid, or one set. Diploid, two sets. So 23 pairs. Sometimes you'll see that as N, and diploid as 2N, like a single copy and 2 copies. So egg 23 chromosomes, sperm 23 chromosomes, put them together, 46 chromosomes in 23 pairs. There are a couple of cases where you would have a different number of chromosomes and still have a viable offspring. Down syndrome, trisomy of chromosome 21. Turner syndrome, you only have one X. Klinefelter's is XXY. And it's very interesting. Okay, so let's start on the males. Reproductive system. So the sperm are made in the testes. And when they are made through these special systems, immature, and they're going to slowly mature, they're going to move out into a duct system. The first part of that duct system, you can see it here probably the best, is the epididymis. Epididymis, it's really fun to say. And it's this long coil where sperm is going to take months to move through it. So when a male ejaculates, that sperm is coming from the epididymis and not the testes. And if it's not ejaculated and it gets old, phagocytes will come in and eat it and break it down. But so then we go from the epididymis during ejaculation through the vas deferens or ductus deferens, and we're going to meet up with some accessory glands, and then it's going to go through the urethra, which goes through the penis and out. And then the accessory glands are going to make secretions important for ejaculation. They're going to make up a majority of what's in semen. They're going to help give the sperm the best chance to survive and fertilize an egg. You'll have the seminal vesicles that are going to make the biggest component. Wrapping around like a donut around the urethra, you've got the prostate. And then these little guys right here are bulbourethral or Cowper's glands. And then you have the penis filled with spongy tissue organized into different sections. I like to think this cross section looks kind of like a fly. And going, oh, I think it's pretty fun. Okay. Great. So let's look a little more closely at the testes. So here are the seminiferous tubules while we're making the sperm. And they're going to go through the efferent ductules to the rete testes to the epididymis. Right? Fun facts about the testes. You have the scrotal sac, which has a couple different muscles in there. The dartus and cremaster muscle. And those are going to contract and relax based on temperature. So sperm want to be a little bit cooler than body temperature. But they don't want to get too cold. So if it's warm, those muscles will relax. The scrotum will be smoother. And those sperm will be farther from the body, so they get to cool down a little bit. And if you're cold, they contract up next to the body, stay warmer. If you wear really tight pants, they can get too warm and not be as functional. This is the whole reason that sperm are on the outside, or testes are on the outside, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. A man's most important sex organ for passing on genetics, you'd think you'd want to have it safe like sharks are up here. But to be able to control the temperature, they put them external. But with all those pain receptors there, it helps keep them a little safer. So it's actually evolutionarily advantageous to have them towards the outside and to want to protect them and not feel pain. And then so then between the cells of the seminiferous tubule, you'll have the interstitial cells producing the sex hormones. Excuse me. Disorder, testicular cancer. So it can be hard to detect because it doesn't usually cause pain. So you want to have monthly inspections on your own. Where you'll feel for inflammation, pain, and irregularities. So those can be as small as like grains of rice. So men should do those self-exams, and if they find anything, go to the doctor. Okay. So now let's look at that duct system a little more. Here you can see the side view of those coiled portions of the epididymis. And that leads to the vas deferens. And so that's kind of like a roller coaster ride that goes in front of the pubic bone and then wraps around the back of the bladder and then it meets up with the prostate, and then it goes through the urethra through the penis. So you can see where the urethra would get urine from the bladder and semen from the vas deferens or ductus deferens. And you can see how those different glands can lead into the ducts. And for a short time here, it's called the ejaculatory duct, but we don't have to worry about that. Okay, go over. So next, let's look at semen. We are not in the Navy anymore. This is our ejaculate. So a little bit of it is sperm, a couple percent. The rest is going to be secretions from those accessory glands that give sperm the best chance of surviving, thriving, swimming up to fertilize the egg. Let's look at what each gland brings to it. So first you've got the prostate gland. So it will secrete some PSA, prostate-specific antigen that helps the sperm break apart after they get into the vagina. Basically, they're clumped together for protection, and then it helps open them up. You're also going to have base in there, alkaline, so that the male's urethra is acidic, the female's vagina is acidic. Basic will help neutralize it so that they can survive better. Couple disorders here. BPH is benign prostatic hyperplasia, so it gets bigger. Issues there can be compression on the urethra, causing urinary retention, and then prostate cancer. So that's one of the things that they check for in males. They have shared risk factors. One is a lot more obviously damaging than the other. And then the seminal vesicles. So prostate gives you about 20% of the secretion. Seminal vesicles are like 70%. So they send the most, they're the green paired portions here, part of sperm, part of semen. So they have sugar. We'll see how the sperm, they have to make ATP so that they can use their flagellum to swim. And then they help assist in the movement. Prostaglandins are going to help hold off the female's immune system so that the sperm don't get killed. It's also why females who have this in there are more likely to get other infections, like a yeast infection. And last, a few percent comes from the bolourethral or Cowper's glands. It'll be a little bit mucusy. It can help rinse some of the acid out. Down here. And then we've got our penis. So that is going to be the copulation portion of sexual reproduction. You've got the shaft, the glans penis, which is the tip with a lot of sensory endings, and the foreskin on the outside. That is sometimes surgically removed with circumcision. I highly recommend watching Adam Ruins Everything on this. And go to YouTube and search it. It's a really interesting idea of why we do circumcisions. They started in the US to be commonplace in like the 30s when people wanted men to masturbate less. So then they started doing it. Actually, Kellogg of cereal started doing it and telling everyone to do it. And then everyone had it done. So then when they became parents, they're like, this is what you do. So that's kind of where we're still at. Sometimes it is done for religious purposes. But in general, as long as you wash properly, having a foreskin has nerve endings and is not necessary to remove. Issues can arise if you become elderly and you can't clean it yourself. Interesting. They also wanted to put acid on the clitoris so that females wouldn't have sexual pleasure, but that one wasn't as commonly accepted. Okay. So let's look at erections and erectile dysfunction. We'll start that in our next video, so stay tuned. Wait for it. Okay.